This is a special presentation from the Brighton Central School District Board of Education.
This is the condensed version and the update based on information that is new since the last time that it was presented. So the Tuesday before the final budget was adopted by the state of New York, we presented the proposal to you, and this is an update based on their work or their lack of work. And what I mean by lack of work is the incredible disappointment that we have in the lack of state aid that's being provided to Brighton, which I'll talk about in the presentation tonight. We had hoped, in fact, we presented to you on the 26th, a place marker of $500,000 was an appropriate amount of aid to count on coming from the state based on the Assembly and the Senate proposals, and they were woefully, I'm not sure if incompetent is the right word, but unable to fulfill even that promise, which is far below the aid that the district should be getting, which does have an impact on our budget, and I'll highlight how we've had to make changes since that point in time. The budget factors, as you know, that we review in this process each and every year, we look at increased staffing demands due to enrollment, emerging needs, changing standards, our labor increases, including the increase in minimum wage, which has an impact throughout our bargaining units, increase in health insurance rates, due to, although the premiums staying flat, the number of people participating, our contribution rates beginning to increase in our health insurance plans, our elective demands for students, the impact of our capital project over time, and planning for full-day kindergarten. This really plays a big part in the conversation tonight around fulfilling the promise that in 2017 our taxpayers approved by a very wide margin a capital project to focus on facility improvements across the district, but to be able to add full-day kindergarten. And we have to now fulfill that promise in the budget process, so we'll explain that as well. The tax levy growth or the property tax cap around 2%, changes in our mandated programs for students, as I mentioned, elective demands, and changes in state and federal aids, the state deficit or potential for a deficit, our proposed, the governor's proposed cap on reimbursable aids, which had us looking differently in our budget as well, and changes in federal funding proposed by the Trump administration, a loss of potential title grant monies. And again, as I mentioned, the foundation aid issue in our district playing the biggest role in this conversation, and the impact of federal tax reform, particularly the elimination of the ability for deduction for state and local taxes, a reduction in that benefit, and how that impacts our taxpayers here in the district who might now or in the next 6 days file their 5 days file their income taxes, and discovering what that means in their process. Really important for us to point out, I think, over and over again, that budgets, in our opinion, communicate our priorities. Where we devote resources, where we use a community devote resources, really says quite a bit about how you feel we should be supporting kids and what you feel is best in terms of our support of kids. Bottom left-hand corner, frankly, it's a value statement. So we can talk about values all we want, but where we put our money is the statement about those values that is, I think, most realistic and says the most. The executive budget proposal meets and exceeds state standards to support every one of our children across the spectrum, everything that they need. It provides funding in support of the blueprint plans that we have, particularly focused on diversity, equity, inclusion, and safety security. And it certainly respects taxpayers and honors commitments. Well, what do we mean by that, particularly when we're proposing going over the cap? It respects the fact that in 2017, taxpayers did approve a capital project referendum to add to our debt service, but to revitalize our facilities. We need to be respectful of that promise. We also owe it to our taxpayers to provide some level of predictability. And if we don't begin to pay on that project now, the program grows significantly in the next budget year. And if we don't plan for full-day kindergarten now and continue to add positions, we will see a spike in property taxes over time, which we don't want to see. So this is respectful of that towards taxpayers. Points of pride included in our budget, really important to point out on the left-hand side, the pieces that we think are so important. They're essential to the puzzle pieces or the pie in this district. Instructional leadership and professional development. Very important to what we're doing, and our level of support each and every day in classrooms, the types of things that are helping teachers continue to do great work with kids. Our co-curricular athletic and art opportunities for students as well are awfully important. Thank you very much. Making sure that our kids, so many of whom connect to school in very different ways through the wide variety of clubs that we have and the many athletic opportunities that they have, that is also supported in this budget. Our additional intervention services for students beyond the mandates, it's what has closed the gap for so many of our kids from all different parts of our school, so all different groups in our school achieving at a very high level because we're giving kids what they need that goes beyond just the state's basic requirement. Our summer school offerings that also support student needs, so students don't fall behind and can stay on the right pace for graduation. We know when kids fall behind and can't get credits, they're less likely to graduate if they don't continue along the right path in high school, and we want to make sure they do that. Small class sizes and additional course offerings are a big part of this budget as well. We continue to be able to support those with some changes. Some of the efficiencies we were able to find, but we still believe we have small class sizes and plenty of electives for students. And the team teaching structure at the middle school is so important to supporting the adolescent child at that level, providing the right amount of time for teachers to meet, talk about students, for students to operate on a team with consistency among their teachers. That structure is able to stay in place with this budget as well. And transportation services for all students in our school community. In other words, we are required to provide transportation for all students, including those in private parochial schools. We're able to continue to support those students, the non-public students, on days when we don't have school. This is the one service that so many of our families take advantage of from the district who may send their children to other schools. This is the place where their tax dollars are going to work for them. And it is very important to their children receiving the education that they're expecting from their private provider as well. It is a relatively small cost item, in fact only costing about $50,000, the difference between the everyday transportation when our kids are in session and when those schools are not in session. But it's something we like to point out that we're able to maintain because we care about every child, even those that are not attending our public school each and every day. And on the right-hand side, new in this budget for 2019-20, we'll have a dedicated full-time equivalency, not necessarily a full-time person, but more funding dedicated as opposed to consultant fees for a diversity consultant in the district for diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's been enormously successful this year with Marla Washington working with us, and we're able to budget for that next year and expand that service for somebody who's been a great advocate for all of our families, a great go-between, somebody who's taught us, worked with our faculty, and worked with many families. The Family Navigator Service, which is helping families navigate the mental health system and bringing services right here on campus from private providers, helping people get in the door. We recognize that a big obstacle to people gaining service, working with mental health providers, is actually getting there and getting an appointment. We have a staff member here that's helping families achieve that, which is helping them be more successful in school and have a better experience. Additional full-time equivalencies to expand our services for English as New Language, ENL students. This is a mandated service that we've accounted for as well. We have more students coming each year. In fact, a large group at particular grade levels moving through our system of students who don't speak English as a first language. I think our teachers provide an excellent service in that way, but we're expanding the number of teachers who will be doing that based on mandate. Enhanced school safety staffing as well, additional security staff to continue to think about how best to keep our students safe, K through 12, and continue planning for the full day kindergarten program, which will happen in 2021. We need to continue to plan personnel, staffing, funding in that portion of the budget so that when we get to that point, we're not in 1 year asking taxpayers to fund the entire expansion of the program. We need to build towards that. That's the respecting taxpayers and making sure we keep those tax increases level over time. And it fully funds, and this is a big important piece of this, in 2017, our taxpayers approved a capital project to revitalize our facilities and be able to add space at Council Rock for full day kindergarten, but to expand and revitalize facilities K through 12. That was approved in 2017. This is when that car payment now comes due. If we wait to begin paying on that debt, we can only wait another year, it compounds our issue. And the simple explanation of this that I'll give several times is we don't have a car payment in our budget. We paid off our car a long time ago. We didn't buy a new car, or when we did, we paid cash for it. So we didn't factor in debt service into our monthly budget like you would do at home for your car payment. And when that car payment ends, some people put that money towards a new car, or they spend it on something else. Well, we spent it on something else. It was called program and lowering people's taxes over time. So now we're able to say we have to go back out. Now we did this project, or we're doing this project. We need to have this debt service in our budget. And this is the year that it goes in. It won't have to go in again. It will now be there. And so that's also funded in this year's proposal as well. The overall spending, we're asking the community to increase spending by 4.5%, but it's really important to point out that's 2.9% in operations. So the regular budget that we would propose to the community and come to you to propose would be an operations budget. In other words, doing everything that we're doing now and looking at programming that we need for next year would be a 2.9% increase in spending. It gets up to 4.5 because of that capital expenditure, the debt service, the car payment that I just mentioned. So that's the increase in capital that accounts for 1.6% of a 4.5% spending increase overall. You can see where our salary line will go up, our total salary spending, so not each person, but total overall based on people leaving, people coming, and retirements, etc., will go up 3.1% total spending in that area. The benefits line actually will be down $185,000. That's because of flat rates in the health insurance plans. The BOCES cost will go up $152,000. That's for an increased cost that's provided to us. We are billed for that. Supplies and services, the overall cost of doing business, again, in an $80 million budget, is up $1.2 million, relatively normal increase. But debt service will go up $1.2 million. That would be a heck of a car if I keep using the household analogy, but that's to build buildings. So remember, I want to go through this again. We didn't build buildings here for a long time. I was explaining earlier to the board the idea of upcycling, not that they need me to explain it to them, but mentioned that a student today told me about how she was designing clothing. This was a student in 7th grade who's a designer. Upcycling, so using previously used materials to upcycle them, make them into something better. Well, we were doing that with our buildings for a long, long time. We were upcycling. Well, now we're at a point where we had to build on, we needed more space, and we had to take care of costly repairs and revitalization throughout the district. We couldn't keep just upcycling. We had to really improve them in ways that required us to take on debt that we did not have. Remember, when we didn't have debt, we used that towards program, and during a period of time when the state was taking money in the gap elimination adjustment, we were able to fund our other expenditures through that same funding, whereas other districts kept their debt service. We didn't do that. Now we're going back to the community saying, okay, we need that back now. We need to put that back in the budget. That accounts for the $1.2 million. Give you a little bit more detail around the spending that we're proposing. All the way down on the right-hand side is that same issue. This is the dollar amount, but spelled out differently in this type of chart. It's a 68% increase, or $1.2 million, because we don't have very much debt service. So we're putting the car payment in. Right above that, transportation services are increasing 11%, but that's because we're taking that service back from BOCES, who could no longer provide it, which is why you see the increase in BOCES spending only 2.1% right here. We had to take back $356,000, or a portion of that, just for particular transportation for students with special needs that BOCES could no longer provide. So we took on the service, but again, there's a drop where we would have had a bigger increase in another place in the budget, and that instructional materials and supplies up 18%, or about $800,000. We see only an increase overall in salary and benefits. When you take that benefit line, that's down just a little bit because we're in a healthcare consortium, does the best job it possibly can at being efficient. A drop of 0.8% along with the salary change. Our total spending in that area is only going up 1.6% in next year's budget. So the biggest change again is that capital increase, that car payment down here at the bottom. But take a look at these mandated services. Really important to point this out. The $572,000, most of that experienced just in the last couple of months, and an increase in tuitions and mandated programs for students who require a particular type of service that's very, very expensive. We don't begrudge that for a moment. We don't regret that. That's what we should be doing. But it's important to note that that's a cost pressure. When that goes up $572,000 and our state aid's not going up nearly that amount, that's $572,000 in an $80 million a year budget, where everything else is going up. And I mentioned, for example, just $1.2 million in material supplies, and our state aid numbers not going up nearly the same percent to account for that, which is why we have to ask the community to help support all of these changes. That contract transportation I mentioned, that's the transportation taken back from BOCES, and $100,000 in health services paid to other districts. And these are the mandated costs when we have students attending private parochial schools in other school districts. Those schools are located. The nursing service that's provided to them is billed back to our district, and the cost of that is going up $109,000 in next year's budget. That debt service funding, again, that car payment issue, what if we were to delay that? What would the problem look like? If you take a look here at the building aid, we're getting very little building aid because you don't get that until the year after you spend it. We'll have a lot more building aid coming on next year to help account for that. The debt service is in the blue column on the left-hand side. Just imagine if we were to take this blue column from 1920, add it on to 2021, because that will not go away. We'll have to pay that. And that will still be a significant expense then that would need to be accounted for in next year's budget. The net levy increase, though, significant coming into this year, but then as you can see, it will level off then over time once the debt service payment is in. Where does our revenue come from? We're very respectful of the notion that most of our funding comes from the taxpayers here in the Brighton Central School District, 67% of that. Our state aid is only 10% in foundation aid, reimbursable aid is 11%. Again, this is not the benevolence of the state, this is their responsibility, this is their job. A large part of state funding, your state tax dollars, are supposed to be coming back to you in the form of a free appropriate public education for your children. This should be much bigger. Your property taxes should be lower, and the state should be doing more to fulfill their obligation. We'd like to see that increase over time. The 1920 budget, the executive budget proposal, assumed that we would get at least 52.5%. Only 52.5% of our aid. Didn't think that that was too big of an expectation at all, considering where the Assembly and the Senate were in the process. But after having to negotiate fully with the governor, we ended up with only 50%, 50.3% of the aid that was due to us, which is why we're coming back to the community then and saying that we need to be over the cap. And we've made accommodations within the budget, but because we're not getting the full amount, even that we had expected, but the full amount or a bigger percentage, without massive cuts to programming or really delaying the strategy of beginning our debt service now and compounding our problem, we have to ask for to go over the cap. It'd be a significant challenge. If you take a look at the foundation aid issue and just a little bit of the history, the orange and the blue all together are the total amount that we should be getting in this school district. And that comes from a formula that's developed, negotiated in Albany years ago that values certain items in your demographics. So the amount of kids you have, the number of kids you have total, but also who receive free and reduced lunch, then as a measure of need in the district, the number of students that speak English as a new language, the number of students with special needs, a variety of factors, and they're weighted in all different ways to distribute a large sum of money across the entire state. So if you have more kids, and if you have more kids with different needs within that formula, you should get more money. Your cost of doing business is more. So when this was agreed upon, you can see we were supposed to be getting about $12 million, and the full phase-in amount up to this point right now, we'd be up to over $16 million that should be coming to the district. Unfortunately, the state's not fulfilled that obligation. And as our numbers have grown and our need has grown over time, the percent increase has not come close to meeting that need. We are only scheduled to receive about $8 million of the $16 million. So we should have been increasing $1.47 million this year. We're only getting $249,000. I can't make it up. Those are the numbers. We should have been going up 1.47. We're only going up $249,000. And there's no exclusion in the tax cap for increased needs in your district. So the state can decide to not honor their formula, but they have not created any mechanism within the tax cap for those variances, for those changes in your student population or your need within your district. We did, thanks to the work of Fight for Brighton and many people in this community, many people in this room, and you as a school board, and your advocacy, achieve a bump of $1 million into the 17-18 year. The problem is, literally in the documents, the ability for us to have that happen in the formula, the way that was written in was deleted in this year's work in the state budget. So that fix, although that $1 million remains in the amount, and we grow a percentage over that amount, the language that would have helped that base grow was eliminated in the agreed upon budget. So people have asked, what about that fix? Well, the fix still exists for that $1 million, but it hasn't kept pace with where that number has continued to grow and where the increases should have been. Well, how does that compare to other people, you might ask? When you look across, or you might not ask, but I'm going to still tell you anyway. Across the whole state, we take a look at what districts look like us. And these are districts from all over the state, different types of districts, but have the most similarity to us. If you take a look at this column right here, the combined wealth ratio. Combined wealth ratio, if you're, as a district, if you come out as a number 1, you're considered an average need district. So that's a combination of property wealth in your community and income tax wealth, the combined wealth ratio. And that's the way the state measures your ability as a school district to pay for schools. So we are just below 1, just below average. And school districts that look like us around the state, Bethlehem, for example, in the Albany area, Orchard Park in the Buffalo area, they were scheduled in their full phase-in of foundation aid to get a little bit more than us. They're a little bit larger, both of those districts. So Bethlehem, 17 million, Orchard Park, just over 17 million as well. And their aid in this coming school year will be 15.9 million in Orchard Park, 12.8 million in Bethlehem. But yet Brighton, scheduled to get 16.2, is only going to get $8.2 million. By percentage, those districts, 93%, 75%, and we're just going to get 50%. How about Sayville? It's going to get 133%. Their number has dropped, likely because they have dropped in the number of students, their needs in their district have changed, yet scheduled to get 14, they're going to get $18 million. None of this makes any sense. If you look locally, where do we stack up? Way at the bottom of the list. In fact, we're 16th lowest of the 700 districts in the entire state. Compared to our neighbors, I think it's interesting if you look here at Penfield, the one with the closest combined wealth ratio to us, 0.922, we're at 0.953, both just under the 1. They're scheduled to get $19.4 million, a little bit bigger than us, so that bigger number makes sense compared to our 16. But they're going to get 13.6, 70% of their aid. And we're only going to get $8.2 million, or 50.4% of our aid. So this is the fundamental issue that we have. And if you look across the Monroe 1 districts, you see this over and over again. East Rochester will get 94%, all the way down to our 50%, and everybody in between. And again, the people with the closest combined wealth ratio to us, even Pittsburgh is going to get 63%. For us, if we were getting 63%, we'd have a near 0% tax increase, to be very honest with you. We'd be getting that much more in aid. It would be such a significant jump for us. So that's what we've advocated for, and Fight for Brighton's been very helpful in that. We don't have a fix yet, and the agreed upon state budget really did very little to address this. So what we're proposing in terms of revenue then is that our community adopt a 4.89% tax increase to support this spending plan. What does that mean for the average taxpayer? Our home value that we use as the average home value is $220,000. That would be a $266 increase in next year's taxes to support that. That's a 4.89% increase. How does that compare then, and what does that mean relative to the levy for capital versus operations? The tax cap number alone, if we just went out at our tax cap number, which is 2.3%, it would cost people $127 total in their tax increase next year. If you take it the levy for capital, so that debt service payment, that alone would be our tax cap number. If all we did was pay the debt service next year, that is the tax cap number right there. The other $138 that we're asking for, this is the levy then for operations. This is everything else we need to make sure that we're supporting new programming for kids, but also to support the current existing programming, the non-mandated pieces that make the Brighton experience what it is. And that honors over here on the right-hand side, the screenshot right from the materials that we distribute to our community, asking for $144 a year. Well, that bill is now coming due for the capital project. This is based on a home value at $200,000. We've now shifted, and this is based on the $220,000 home. So we're pretty close to that number that we had promised, in fact, just a little bit less. If you take a look at what does this all mean, though, so this tax increase, the total pyramid here is the 4.89%. What is it going towards? To just re-illustrate this point, the cap number right there of 2.3% would stop us at just support for ongoing operations and programming, period. That number alone. What we need to do, though, is add in, of course, the debt service related to the improvement plan and new programming of just 0.29% in safety, security, wellness, and this is additional mental health support, additional security staff, and diversity equity support for programming, including restorative practices, and the diversity equity consultant to work in the school district. That's the additional 2.89% that we are proposing, the additional increase that we need to be able to do that. We've got to take care of that debt service, get it in right now, and we've got to be able to continue to grow our program and at the same time support ongoing operations and academic programs. Remember, if all we had was just the cap number, we could just do the debt service and cut out support for ongoing operations and academic programs, which would mean dramatically cutting programs to do that. Or vice versa, just support ongoing operations and programs and have to cut out the debt service and new programming up here. So if we just had the cap number. What if the budget, what if this proposed budget isn't approved by 60% of voters? Because remember, the property tax cap doesn't say that you can't choose as a community to exceed that 2.3% number. It simply says that if you choose to do that, 60% of people have to choose to do that. And that for doing that, you will not be eligible for the relief check, the property tax relief check that you've been receiving. So those are really the two factors. But as a community, you can choose to do that. So spending would have to be reduced by $1.3 million in order to become CAP compliant. And we would have to look at non-contingent equipment, classroom furniture. We'd have to defer the debt service, the capital project piece that I just mentioned to you, that car payment I keep saying over and over again. We'd have to defer funding for the full-day kindergarten program. We'd have to look at department reductions and staff and non-mandated program reductions as well. But that's just delaying the problem. Those items will still need to be funded in next year's budget, and we would have to look at extended studies, foreign language at grade 6, instrumental music in grade 4, the additional athletic, extracurricular, arts, co-curricular activities, and the additional supports and opportunities that we have for students. That would be the result, for sure. The tax cap over time has had an interesting impact in the district. When it first came about, we went out to the community and said, we don't need to be at the cap number. Just like you can choose as a district to go over it if you choose to do that, you can also choose to be under that cap number. We did. We only said to the community, we only need this amount. We don't need to go all the way to the cap. So in 12-13, we were $584,000 under the cap amount. The following year, $439,000 under the cap amount. But in 14-15, we went back out to the community and said, listen, we're straightforward with you then. We will always be straightforward with you about what we need. In the last years, we haven't needed to be at the cap number. In fact, the cumulative increase over those times, if we had stayed at the cap number, would have been more than what we were asking to go out over the cap. And said that to the community at that point, and the community approved going out over the cap, feeling comfortable in that conversation. We believe that we were asking for what we needed. We have been able to, since that time, in 15-16, 16-17, 17-18, 18-19, been able to stay under the cap, which is where we always want to be. We're coming back now to the community to have that same conversation and say, now we need to again be over the cap because that's the need. That's what we need in order to support excellence and maintain our programs and to protect the long-term financial health of the district when we think about, again, that car payment, the debt service issue, and the planning for a full-day kindergarten. That issue around the property tax relief check. This was an issue several years ago. Everybody likes a check. No question about it. Especially when it's being written to you. So in the legislature and the governor in particular decided to provide this credit instead of perhaps reducing income taxes or actually fulfilling the foundation aid formula, which is what they should be doing and have not been able to do. They decided to give people a check after the fact based on what your district did in the budget process. And it was some measure of property tax relief. For many people, the check was relatively small. It's all across the spectrum. It's based on your income and your star relief. The maximum star relief that people are getting is $794, the current max in the basic star program. Your relief check that you received is based on your income. So if your income is $75,000 or less, you get 85% of the $794. This doesn't affect the $794. You're still getting that credit, your star credit. This is simply the check after the fact. If your income is between $75,000 and $150,000, you're getting 60% of that max amount. Between $150,000 and $200,000, you're getting 35%, and between $200,000 and $275,000, 10.5% of the $794. So the check varies for every taxpayer. We've been completely unsuccessful in finding out from the Office of Real Property Tax. It doesn't seem to keep a record of this. How much does that mean for people in Brighton? What was the average check? What did people usually get? That's a record that they cannot produce for us. So we're asking our community members to think about the rebate check that they got, realize that your amount will be similar to that amount, and understand that that's not something that this community would be eligible for going into next year. You will still get star. This is just the additional check that came after the fact that was a different amount. Your star savings will still exist. That's not in question. We recognize there are advantages and disadvantages to going over the cap. The advantages are we preserve program, we can avoid cuts in those programs, we can fully fund that local share of that car payment, start paying that now. It does speed the growth of the levy, so the percentage increase in next year's budget, this eases some of the pressure on that because the levy starts out a little bit larger. And it speeds the funding for full-day kindergarten as well. So in other words, we would be able to still be on track for full day kindergarten and having those positions with level tax increases. The disadvantage is it's applied earlier in the project, so it's one more year you're paying on that. It's as if you're able to make an extra payment on your mortgage. There's a great advantage on the other end, but you're starting it now. Overall taxes increase when you increase the levy base. We understand that. So incrementally next year when it goes up over a slightly larger number. And losing that rebate check as well is a concern for us that we don't take lightly at all. And I know you as board members don't on behalf of community members. So what did we do to make reductions along the way? We had to find efficiencies as well, particularly because the state did not come through with aid, and we had to do everything we could to get as close as we possibly could to the cap number, trying to also maintain program. So we adjusted our mandated services. Of course, I mentioned to you the over $500,000, actually nearly $600,000 in increased costs. So we had to add that back in since we gave you the preliminary budget in January. We reduced the budget to actual projections, the risk provision. So all these bars in green are the areas where we were able to reduce from the preliminary budget that we gave you in January. These are the areas where we analyzed what our spending was, our budget to actual, and we were able to not budget as much in some lines. That's the budget to actual. Our change in revenue assumption, so places where we are able to use revenue differently. Instead of replenishing some reserves, put this towards expenses in next year's budget. Our department reductions for particular equipment, adjusted our capital allocation, so using the amount out of a capital reserve to go towards capital as well. Our class size adjustments, course offerings, we are impacting class sizes slightly, and electives. Our breakage from retirements, we've been able to count on more in that area as well. We've removed some of the new positions that we presented to you in the preliminary budget that would have been used to accommodate enrollment changes. And our occupational education services, the amount of out-of-district placements we're able to provide, particularly in BOCE's programming, we've reduced the number of those from the preliminary budget as well. So our changes in staffing, in our proposed increase of $1.1 million in some staffing, we're looking at new positions for enrollment. For one, it's 6th grade. Our state mandates, we mentioned to you the English as a new language mandate. That's a mandated service, but we have to have positions for that. The proposal for diversity equity staff member to now be funded in the budget outside of the consultant model that we have this year, so this will be a set amount devoted to that position. The family navigator position that I mentioned to you before, bridging that gap for families and mental health. 3 security guard positions for use throughout the district. The full day kindergarten spending of $113,000 so that we avoid a future tax increase spike to pay for that position. And we're bringing $50,000 worth of grant funded position back into the general fund, again because of proposals from the federal government to cut funding from the federal government to the district through the state. We want to make sure those positions are funded. We need to take them out of grants, which could disappear very quickly, and are proposed to be reduced. And on the right-hand side of the reductions that we are making, we've increased class size and reduced elective offerings at the secondary level 7 through 12, about a 1.4 reduction total. And so any of the new funding for enrollment projections for growth enrollment has been removed. Class size adjustments at 1st grade, we're just going from 19.4 now to 21.12, and that's from the preliminary budget to this proposal. But we'll show you how those compare to actual numbers this year. It's very comparable. And in grade 2, class size from the preliminary budget to this proposal from 20 to 21.78. And again, class size and electives about another $150,000, and this was actual FTEs reduced at the high school, reductions in each department, which will change scheduling, course selection as well, and larger class sizes in some electives. Although we do this with a heavy heart, we also feel like we're still able to offer quite a bit for students in this proposal, and that would change if we are not out over the cap. That class size issue that I mentioned to you, in grade 1 next year we're proposing being at 11 sections, which we are this year as well. Their class size will go from 20.5 as a group of first grades to 21.1. Grade 2, which is currently at 22.7, will actually be smaller next year, 21.8. But that same group of kids who are currently in first grade this year, 20.5, will go up slightly to 21.8 going into next year. So a minor increase in the class size, but again, something we feel we can accommodate. We always would like them as small as possible, but in this current situation, that seemed the most appropriate reduction. And we'll go to 12 sections at each grade at French Road. We're currently at 12, 12, and 13 will be a 12, 12, 12 next year. And actually at 5th grade, that results in a 0.4 child reduction at the 5th grade level. And we're pretty close. We're up slightly at 4th grade, just 0.8, and up about 2 students at the 3rd grade level going into next year. But again, relatively comfortable with those numbers. Wish they were a little bit smaller, but we can manage that going into next year given the circumstance. The Capital Reserve Fund withdrawal, we're proposing to the community being able to withdraw $3 million to continue our work. Specifically, the authorization is to withdraw $3 million from the district's existing 2015 Capital Reserve Fund to pay additional costs associated with the capital improvement project that was approved by voters May 16, 2017, but this is additional costs that we're taking out of reserves. Still sticking to the promise of borrowing what we said we would borrow, that voters approved at that time, but taking more out of reserves to cover any other increased costs in the project. This money can't go towards anything else. So it can't go to bridge any other gap. This is specifically put aside by taxpayers over time with revenue that comes in, capital aid from the state that goes into that reserve to pay for capital expenses. It can't go to pay for anything else along the way. The Technology Reserve Fund currently has a balance of $1.5 million. We need to withdraw $500,000 so that we don't have to take this expense out of the general fund, which can you imagine if we had to take that $500,000 and put even more pressure on spending going into next year? And this is for the purchase of servers, infrastructure, tablets, our staff laptop replacements, the way people do business, our student device replacements as well, and AV hardware across the district. Again, that way this expense, which is an expense that is required for us to be able to operate, doesn't have to come out of the general fund. It can come out of this reserve, which has been, again, put aside over time. Just want to repeat again this issue around the property tax cap and what this means. The total increase on the screen is 4.89%. The cap would stop us right there at support just for rolling over the budget with current programming, but not including debt service and not including the important proposals around safety, security, wellness, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. The additional 2.89% allows us to do that, protects our long-term financial health. It is over the cap. We feel that that's important to do at this time. If we did not do that, we would again delay our problem and have to look at $1.3 million in reductions, which would include equipment, furniture, deferring that debt service, deferring planning for full-day kindergarten. We'd have to look at reductions in departments and in staffing and non-mandated programs, just delaying the problem to a future year and only growing the problem, frankly, over time. The summary of all of this, at the bottom, a new cost of $266 for a home valued at $220,000, and of course, also the loss of the rebate check. We do understand that. Not the loss of STAR, the loss of that additional rebate. And it reflects, this budget then reflects what we value, we believe. It honors the impact of that 2017 vote, responds to the mandated increases in spending for student programming that they need. It honors our blueprint commitments, specifically relative to diversity, equity, inclusion, safety, security. It's a total spending increase of 4.5%. Only 1.6% of that in capital, 2.9% in operations, which would have been able to be accomplished under the cap, but we have to add for that long-term financial health and new programming. Budget hearing on the 14th, and of course, a vote on the 21st, and Kiwanis spaghetti dinner. Very important on that day as well. Any questions for me?
Does anybody have any further questions for Dr. McGowan? Because what we're going to do is I'm going to ask for a motion to adopt in a moment, and then we'll have discussion specific to the budget and our thoughts and anything we want to share on that. But I want to make sure while he's up there, if there's any further questions that we have.
I won't run away too far.
All right, then. May we have a motion, please, to approve the 2019-20 Brighton Central School District budget as proposed to the Board of Education in the executive budget proposal at the March 26, 2019 meeting and updated by Dr. McGowan's proposal this evening.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Andrea and seconded by Marv. Any further comments, discussion, thoughts that anybody would like to share?
No.
I guess.
Just that we're deeply disappointed by what happens in Albany, that schools
Correct.
are not fairly funded across the board, and that this hits our district particularly hard.
We are, as we've discussed, and I don't want to take any more time, I will remind folks watching, all the budget material is posted online. All the archive of all of our meetings is on the YouTube archive channel, and you can take a look at the numerous discussions that we've had and talked about funding from the state and all the issues that we face. I guess what I would start off with on behalf of the board is thanking Kevin and Lou and Debbie, all of our people really, because this has been one of the most difficult budget periods we've ever gone through. So what we've come up with, I have to say on one hand, absolutely represents what we value in this community, what we value for the school district, but it is very disappointing for us as a Board of Education to be proposing a budget that, while we believe it's the right thing, it exceeds the property tax cap, and it's at a level higher than we believe Brighton property taxpayers should really be paying. And it is entirely the fault of our state government in Albany. I'm sorry, but that is the absolute fact. If the governor and our elected officials in the Assembly and Senate were to finally figure out a way to properly and adequately fund public education in this state and apply the Foundation Aid formula in any way, shape, or form that was fair, that we've laid out, that we've showed them on numerous occasions over a number of years in Albany, we would not be in this position. We planned very prudently over the years. We planned this debt service. We planned the K-12 facilities upgrade because we absolutely needed to do that, both for the reasons well-known, full-day K and the rebuild of Council Rock, which we remind folks is substantially less expensive than the first alternative that we discussed, which was to rebuild Brookside School. But all of our buildings need work. They're great buildings. We're very fortunate, but we have to plan for the future, and that work had to be done. The voters approved it, and we are in that boat. So we move forward, I think, with the best possible outcome given all the circumstances that we all operate under, and we will continue to message to the community, and we ask the community to talk with us and have conversation and understand why we are where we are. And separately, we've already begun that process of working with those in Albany again, not only on one-time aid, which may happen. We don't have huge hope, and if there is one-time aid, temporary aid for the moment, it won't be a huge amount of money, but we really need to stay to the work of getting this thing fixed for Brighton for the long haul, and we'll continue to work on that. That unfortunately can't happen until at least the next budget season, which would be next January through the end of March. So that part we will dedicate ourselves to and stay to that. But the task at hand right now, this budget and where we are, some reductions have to be made. We just can't fit it all in. I think the group has done a wonderful job of trying to keep preservation of program first and foremost, and we are on board with that. So, Christina,
I just want to thank
Yep.
again, like our administrators for all the advocacy, but also all our parents.
Yes, absolutely.
And students were writing letters at
Yep.
those concerts, and so I just wanted to thank all of them.
We do
too.
appreciate that, and we will likely need that additional help as we move forward
We will
into
definitely need it.
next year's budget and trying to get this Foundation Aid formula at least repaired, if you will, for a fairness aspect. And we continue to advocate to try to get that floor to at least 60%. And that is a minimal ask, and we're not asking for the world on this. So anyway, so that is what it is. We'll continue to message to the community. We will continue to send out material. The board plans to message tomorrow to the community through the email system with our details and thoughts and hopes and feelings on the budget. And we'll continue to do that over the next month, actually about 5 weeks prior to the budget vote. So completing our conversation, I guess, then we will say all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much.
I want to take a moment too to thank our administrators here and Lou in particular for leading this, your work, Fight for Brighton. Yes, for many students and parents, concerts everywhere who were advocating, writing letters, doing what they could. But your support throughout this as a board and your guidance as well. This was definitely the most difficult place to get to at this point. And it does not feel to us like a success when we were proposing being over the cap. It feels successful in protecting program to the best of our ability. and finding the best ways to be efficient in doing that, but it doesn't feel good to be recommending an increase that we're paying to myself, personally, and many of us that participate in this as well as parents, and I know you feel that way, and it's a struggle. There is $150 million in the state budget for member item money, legislators, and $50 million of that is the governor's. It would take $60 million and change to bring every district that's under that CWR of 1 to 60%. $60 million. Instead, the $150 million will be spread out among a wide variety of political projects and pets and things that seem like fun and signs and things that people can sign their name to and take credit for in campaign commercials, when $60 million and change would more than make up our gap and would not mean we'd have to go over the cap for a long, long time if we could get to that point. So it's just something to think about. We've advocated, we've asked the question already, what do we need to do for next year? What data do you need? How can we impress upon you the need to do this? There is no explaining that gap. So when people look at it and say, I don't understand, how could you be that far off? The reality is there is a political solution and there's a practical solution. The practical solution says we should get a certain dollar amount, but that doesn't fit the political narrative and where people would like to devote money when they're voting on it largely behind the scenes at the end of the day, and that's a problem for us. So thank you very much for the support. We will continue to advocate. That is the biggest challenge in front of us, though, is the state fulfilling their obligation and us not harming kids in the meantime because they haven't been able to do that. So thank you very much.
This has been a special presentation from the Brighton Central School District Board of Education.